Barbie alcoholic from Malibu. Um, you know, I don't know what to say. Um, I don't know if that's what qualifies me. I've always kind of like held on to that idea because I grew up with songs, come on Barbie, let's go party, and where's Ken, and I just wanted to be the anti-Barbie. Like I just really wanted to be the anti-Barbie deep down because, Barbie in my head had this really traditional home, and I came from a really dysfunctional home. So Barbie alcoholic. Beyond that, I want to start here. I'm this infinite soul, right? Having this really wild human experience, as we all are. And I've been through some stuff this year that changed me. It changed the way I look at life. It changed the way I feel things. It changed my story. It changed the way I respond to life. And so I stand here tonight feeling, I haven't really gotten in the groove of how to integrate this huge piece of my life into my story. So I'm gonna share, I'm gonna share Barbie as an alcoholic. I'm gonna share Barbie in a spiritual awakening, and I'm gonna share Barbie going through something that turned her life upside down, and I'm gonna share what that looks like now. And within that woven fabric, the powerful piece is how I respond now to life, how I respond. And where I learned that, our steps are so spiritual and so powerful. I'm just going to kick it off. I lost my son in December. I'm going to kick it off to a long battle with cancer. And I lost my brother 2 years before that to this disease. And we lost our house in the Woolsey fire. And there's been a lot of loss. There's been a lot of if there's a perfect time to drink, now's the time because your feelings are so big. And I didn't drink because I stay on the playing field. And, you mentioned that. I get out of the stands and I get on the field and I play with you guys. And I do the deal with you guys and I stay in the middle of the herd. And Alcoholics Anonymous has wrapped itself around me and carried me through the heaviest times of my entire life. So now that I got that off, because that's the confusing piece, like how do I merge this huge moment that changed my life completely into my story? I haven't really figured that out yet. But I grew up in Malibu, and I grew up with a mom who was one of us, and she was wild. She was a wild woman. She is still. And it was me and three brothers, and we grew up in the 80s, and she was, heavy in her addiction in the 80s and her alcoholism. And, I share these little key things of my story that just don't ever change. The fact is, my drinking started really young because I grew up in that household. I grew up in the household of neglect. And it was shown to me, it was, so the doom room, does anyone know, raise your hand if you know the doom room, okay. Of course, this whole row does. So in Malibu, we have this little dive bar called the Doom Room, and that was that's the number I remember from my childhood, 457-994, because as a little girl, Blake, the bartender, and I were on a first name basis, because I would call and I would ask for my mom, and I would ask her to come home, and she would eventually come home, at 2 a.m. with the bar. And that was my, sound machine to my childhood. And as soon as everyone came home, I kind of felt safe. It was like the noise was there, the chaos was there. So chaos became this comfort to me, the dysfunction and the chaos, it was just familiar. And so, going downstairs, 7, 8 years old, cocktails, cocaine on the, 70s wooden coffee table, I would, pour the brown drinks and the brown drinks, and just kind of match the colors and put the residual Coke on my gums, and I would go off to school. And so there wasn't like a pivotal moment. I was just kind of like born into this house. And as I started to grow and get older, things happened that I wasn't protected, from. And I was so sensitive, and I know so many of us in this room just feel right here. My alcoholism starts right here because I feel so much, and then it works its way up into my head. And then I spin out, and I can't control the big feelings, so my mind wants to just run, and I want to push those feelings away from my heart. Like, that's my experience. So these things started happening, and I didn't know how to walk through it, and I became attached to that story. That narrative of trauma, of pain, of suffering, of fear, I became attached to that. And I became so attached to that, this like identity of becoming an alcoholic to fit into this house and not knowing how to walk through life. So by the time I got into high school, my alcoholism was already, full force, and it was the number one priority in my life. And I became that girl. I was the lower companion where like people weren't allowed to come to my house. We were that house. We're old school Malibu, and it was wild. It was like the Wild West. And I went to 7 high schools in 3 years, and I share that I never moved because I recognized what a geographic is. Once I got in here, I was like, oh wow, that was a geographic, because it was the people, it was the weather, it was the all-girls school, it was the gangs. I mean, it was just I was so uncomfortable because there was this emptiness in my soul, right? I had this like void in my soul that I didn't know how to fill. So I tried to fill it with everything, because my alcoholism will show up in so many different colors, wrapped in so many different bows. And I just needed to fill that, and I didn't know that the only thing that could fill that was a God of my understanding. I didn't know that. I had no idea. And I was scared of religion because I was I was sent to a Catholic school, and so I was afraid of God. It scared me. It was like a condemning. It was very kind of structured and strict, and I was a wild, undisciplined child. So throughout my teenage years, I fell in love with the Grateful Dead. That's an important part of the story because I ended up, traveling to go see shows. And if any of you know what that looks like, it's, unless you're a wharf rat, which now I am, it was destructive. But the truth is I just kept running from myself because it was too painful to walk through life, and I didn't know how, because I didn't have this beautiful fellowship. I didn't have a God of my understanding. I didn't have, life outlined for me. I didn't know how to do it. So when I was 16, I got pregnant with that baby who just passed away, and I remember that feeling of, this child is going to fill that void. I'm going to love him. He's going to love me back. This is it. This is that, it's me and him against the world. And I was California sober throughout that pregnancy. And when they put him on my chest and we made eye contact, and it was that like soul recognition that I've been waiting 17 years for you. I had him when I was 17. What took you so long? I will take a bullet for you. I will do anything for you. It was just that love was so powerful and so strong. And my disease was in the hospital parking lot doing push-ups, and I didn't know that. I didn't know about Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew that, I don't want to get into the drunkalog and the drugalog, because we're all in here for a reason, and it doesn't feel good to even talk about it. I was very sick. I was very unwell. And 2 months later, I left that baby boy who chose me to be his mom with strangers, because my disease just got its claws in me. And, the first time I came into these rooms, I was 19, and I had no intention of really staying sober. I was out of what I needed, and all my friends were in rehab, and I didn't do the steps, and I didn't get a sponsor, and I didn't do the deal, and it didn't stick. And I share this because I dragged him through the coals. I dragged him through the coals of my addiction as a teen mom. And when I was 21, he was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. And it shifted everything for me. It was a genetic mutation. It shifted everything because now these big feelings it just wanted to, engulf my heart and squeeze my heart to where I couldn't breathe. And I didn't know how to walk through that. So my solution was to just push those feelings down. So for a decade, we were in the hospitals and big surgeries, and I'm stealing his pain meds, and doctors are trying to wake me up to have conversations with me. And I don't know how to do this because I don't have you guys. I don't know how to do this. This is too big for me, but I had to keep showing up. And, I look back now, my life is a stepping stone. There's just these stepping stones that have gotten me here. And at that time, I don't regret it. It allowed me the space to survive. It got me through those moments. I ended up having 3 kids from 3 different dads because I'm a solid alcoholic, and I don't know how to do life. I don't know how to get married to one person and stay with that person and hold down a job and create stability for my children because it was never shown to me. I don't know how to do that. So I have these 3 kids, and my oldest son is using me as an example and seeing the way I'm living my life, and he decides that that's how we live life. So he starts partying with me. I end up partying with him. I end up crashing high school keg parties. Let's just be real. And he's like, "Mom, what are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I had you at 17. I've got, making up to do." And he started just following down the path that I was down, going down. And here's this child that I fought so hard to keep him alive. And I've set this example for him. And the guilt and the shame that came with that were more big feelings that I couldn't deal with. So the only way that I knew how to deal with that was to stay loaded and push them down. So this is this cycle that I was in, right? I was attached to the narrative. I was attached to the suffering. I was attached to the story that my dad left and my mom is an addict, and I live in a chaotic home, and I wasn't shown how to do life, and all these things happened, and my son's sick, and that was my story. That was my story. And I created this tough exterior, and it was all fear-based. It was all fear-based. I was angry because I was afraid. And it was this tough exterior, and I didn't understand at the time that that was just an example of weakness, right? I was so afraid. There's so many pieces to this puzzle that blow my mind. Now in retrospect, looking back at alcoholic Barbie and Barbie when she had her spiritual awakening, and who I am now, it's 2 different timelines, 2 different humans. So anyways, I completely self-destruct my life. I've got 3 kids. I blow a marriage up. I move in my mom's garage. I think I've arrived. It was the best thing. I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, let me rewind. My ex-husband was sober. And I remember looking at you guys feeling like you were a cult. I was like, the cult members are here again. I need to leave. And, there would be book studies at the house. And I was so repelled because it was just, you guys were reflecting, I could see how sick I was when you guys would show up at our house. And so I left him because he was a treated alcoholic at the time. and I was an untreated alcoholic. And it's just it's like oil and water. It just doesn't work. And I blew everything up, and I moved into my mom's garage. And, I spiraled for 3 years. I spiraled really, really bad. And it got dark. It got dark. I was unemployable. I maxed out every credit card, just avoiding collections. It was like I wasn't a mom of integrity. I wasn't a woman of integrity. I hated myself. Like, I hated myself. And I remember that feeling, and I'm sure many of you guys can relate, like brushing your teeth and you can't make eye contact. Like, you can't look at yourself. It's like looking away, because it was this deep-rooted hatred. Because deep down I knew that my kids deserved more. And I knew I came here for a bigger purpose. Like, I knew that my job on earth was bigger than just being an alcoholic. Like, I knew that. And I saw how my kids were suffering. My daughter's the reason. I'm not going to say the reason, but she's the one that pushed me into Alcoholics Anonymous, because on March 29th, 2012, I had been on this nasty run, a nasty run. I picked her up at 6:30 in the morning. I hadn't slept to get her to her 10th grade year, school. She was in high school, 10th grade, and it was silence the entire way in the car. Like, you could have cut through the air. And before she got out of the car, she looked at me and she said, and I share this because it's powerful. She looked at me and she said, "You're disgusting." And for whatever reason, I don't know how many times in my life I've heard those words, "I'm disgusting," but I heard it and I felt it. And I feel like that was like the expansion of the skies kind of opening up, and God just coming down and gracing me, right? Like, gracing me with this loving presence, because my entire life I've held the weight of the world on my shoulders, feeling like it's me against the world and everyone's out to get me. And if you only knew the stuff that I had been through, if you only knew. And it was this like shell tough exterior. And I softened that morning. I waved the white flag. It was just total surrender. And I called a girlfriend who had 21 years of sobriety. And I was like, "I need help." And she told me that, she had been saving me a seat, and, picked me up and got me to my first meeting, Fountain and Vine, Thursday, 2 o'clock in Hollywood. And I remember going into that meeting so afraid, because my solution for 37 years was no longer an option, because I was going to die, or I was going to get locked up and my kids weren't going to have a mom. Like, it was very clear. It was that moment of, it's one or the other, and it had to be this. So I had to relearn how to live. And I was so willing, because the self-hatred was so deep. It was like cellular. I couldn't go on. And I found a meeting every day on my phone, and I had a 5-year-old at the time, and I found women's meetings, and I found meetings with childcare, and I took commitments, and I would just bring him in. Hole in the Sky in Canoga Park at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday night was my home group, and I would go there and pick him up a little In-N-Out burger every single Tuesday, and I'd walk in, and those women were salty, and they were amazing, and they were like, "You sit down, we've got him, we'll help with our homework, you pay attention." And they surrounded me, those women surrounded me so lovingly and made me feel so accepted and appreciated and loved in that room. And they watched my little boy. And, that first year, it was just meeting after meeting and women's meeting. And I surrounded myself, and I got a sponsor, and I skimmed through the steps. I thought if I just kind of did a skim job, I would hold my seat, because I wasn't ready, to get honest. I wasn't ready. And then at, year 2, I got another sponsor, and I went really deep with her, because I love a good hefty resentment. Like, because that's the like tough exterior, right? That made me feel protected, was a good resentment. Like, you do me wrong, I'm gonna kick your ass. It was just that like mentality. And I visualized myself, like, throughout my sobriety, walking around with this golden shovel, right? Like, God's going to help me co-create this experience of digging a little deeper and a little deeper. Like I can get to the surface and I'm like, you know what, there's something underneath that. I'm going to dig a little deeper. And I did that with sponsor number 2. And, you know, Dad, let's talk about Dad. Dad was number 1 in bold letters on that resentment list. It was like, Dad left me, he wasn't there to protect me. Dad, 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 it was all his fault. And when I had to do my part in that one, I was like, I don't have a part. I was a little girl. He left when I was 6 months old. He doesn't know how to I had no part in that. But throughout the years, my dad would try and show up, you know, like a phone call here and there. And it was brought to my attention that I was holding Dad hostage to the title Dad. And I was like, oh, so I had to think about that. And it was like this awakening where my dad didn't know how to be a dad. And that's okay, because I had an expectation that he should show up a certain way in my life. And that was unrealistic. But maybe my dad was trying to show up as my friend, and I wasn't allowing it. And that was my part. He was trying to show up, but I was holding him to the title Dad, and maybe he could just be my friend. So I made those amends to him. You know, unfortunately, my dad isn't the best friend. You know, he doesn't know how to be the greatest friend, but that's okay. That's okay, because he's just this infinite soul having a human experience, and he's doing the best he can. And deep down, you know, doing these steps, I found this forgiveness, this deep forgiveness and this compassion, you know, this deep compassion that, you know what, like, this is his journey. It's his journey. And he may be suffering more than I am, not knowing how to show up as a dad. And I'm going to, like, send him love, and it's okay. And, you know, my education, that was a big one, you know, making an amends to my education. I didn't show up for school. You know, I was like the kid in 10th grade. My mom had my report card on the fridge. She's like, I didn't know it was possible to get 5 F minuses. And I was like, well, you know, it's what happens when you just don't show up. You know, like I didn't care. And I became PTA president of my son's school, you know. Year 2 of my sobriety, I was like, I'm gonna heal this. I'm gonna heal this piece of me. And I showed up. I went to like district meetings and all the PTA meetings, and I was like the tattooed president girl at, you know, Malibu Elementary, Point Dume Elementary, and I was like, you know what? Like, this is part of my journey. I've got to heal it. You know, and looking at my character, I don't like the word defect, because we're not defected. We're not. You know, we've got this beautiful soul blueprint that we come here with, and that's like who we're supposed to be. And then we have this imprint, and the imprint is the suffering and the fear and the pain. And it's just the imprint, but it's not who we truly are. So I'm mindful with my words. I'm not crazy about the word defect. I call them trauma responses, right? Like, we've been through some stuff in our life, and whatever that looks like, you know, my first soul wound was being born because I forgot where I came from. You know what I mean? Like the disconnect of like, forgetting where you came from, you know, that's like this wound. So we respond to that. You know, I'm going to tap into step 2, because that is my absolute most beautiful thing, because you guys taught me, where's my water? That I get to find a God of my understanding. And that was the most powerful thing that I've ever heard, because I was raised Catholic, and I just, you know, I was scared of God. And when I was given that permission, I took this white canvas in my head, and I got to paint it what made sense to me. And my canvas is so colorful, and it's so beautiful, and I've got like Jesus meditating with Buddha, and I've got Mary, and I've got the moon and the sun and the ocean. I'm an ocean girl, and nature, and it's so colorful, and it's so beautiful, and I can visualize that, this essence of divinity that makes sense to me, and it doesn't have to make sense to you. That's the power of finding a God of our understanding. And I get to connect to that God every single day. You know, I get to connect, and I always use the cross reference. You know, before I came up here, I was looking at that cross. And this is the vertical. This is our spiritual experience. And this is the horizontal. And this is our human experience. And every single day, I try to lock myself in the center of that cross. It's the perfect balance of being a soul, having a human experience. And, you know, step 2 brought me there. Step 2 brought me to understand that I am just this soul, and I can forgive myself because the imprint of who I am is what gets up here, right? Like the imprint of what I've been through is what gets up here and wants to spiral and turn into a Category 5 hurricane and take me out and tell me that I'm not worthy and I'm this big and I'm not good enough to be my kids' moms and I'm not good enough to be married to my husband and I'm not good enough to be sponsoring women. And, that's what my head tells me. And I have to change that narrative and know that I am enough. I am enough, and it's progress, not perfection. I am a human being who's got this mind that wants to take me out, but I have this beautiful soul made up of the essence of God that wants me to be whole and knows that I am whole and wants me to live this life that I'm destined to live. This is where my story's confusing for me because I had this it changed all the time. There were lessons, like every week there's a new lesson. So anytime I spoke, it's like I kind of tapped in on that. But I feel my son right here with me. I feel I asked him to stand up here with me. And I asked him to support me and be with me. And the interchangingness, it seems like it keeps taking these different roads. And I apologize, and I hope you guys can bear with me and be with me throughout this journey of vulnerability and what my life looks like now. My son found his way in these rooms. He transitioned with 9 years of sobriety. And, he saw my life change and he was attracted to that. I didn't push anything down his throat. He saw the beauty come about in my life. He saw me fall in love with this amazing man. I'm not throwing you under the bus tonight, honey. Actually, I am. No, I'm just kidding. Just really quick. He was 16 years sober, and I was 3 weeks sober, and we were set up on a blind date, and I told him I had some time. And then I sent him a picture of my 60-day chip, and he was like, "Whose is this?" And I was like, "That's mine." And you stayed, so thank you. But what our house looked like while my son was on hospice, and he was sick. He got really sick the last 5 years. Was a house of peace and faith and principles and love and acceptance and trust and all these tools that we have in our toolbox that one by one I got to put in that toolbox and you got to put in that toolbox and Lion got to put in that toolbox and we put them all out on the table. And we utilized every single one of them. And we sat with his passing so beautifully in such acceptance. There was no denial, and we got to create ceremony around that experience in the most loving way. And I think about that I would have missed that. I would have missed that. I wouldn't have been able to show up for that if it wasn't for you guys showing me how to live and how to walk through really big feelings, knowing that they're impermanent, knowing that if I walk through them and I put my big girl panties on and I'm brave enough, I'm going to walk to the other side and I'm going to be okay because I can come in these rooms and I can be hugged by all of you guys and I'm supported no matter what. The last few meetings I've spoke at, it's just been these circles, and I just that's what it feels like in here. It's just this circle of support. We all speak the same language. Our stories are so different, but we recognize where we've been and who we are. And that spiritual experience that I had doing these steps, it was it cracked that hard shell off. It cracked it open and all of a sudden this light came out and it just melted away. And I realized softness and forgiveness and compassion are where the strength lies. It switched. And now I lead with my heart, with compassion. I get out of my head, I bring the energy down to my heart space, and I find compassion. And I'm not attached to the suffering of what my son went through. I'm no longer attached to the story of my life. It's not who I am. It happened. I can recognize that it happened, and it brought me here, and it made me the woman I am today. But my son, and I'm going to talk about him. I want to talk about him. His name was Lion. I don't ever want to not talk about him because it was beautiful, and he died in my arms. And we created the most beautiful ceremony. And Alcoholics Anonymous showed up at our house and surrounded our house along with all his friends. And we were so supported and we were so loved through that. And not one time did I want to go drink. Not one time did I ever think, you know what? A drink is going to fix this. Not one time. Because there's this peace and there's this light and there's this divine spirit that lives in my heart space now because you guys gave me permission to be willing to discover what that is. And I go to sleep every night. It's like the superpower I have. I lay my head on the pillow with a smile, and I can like go to sleep. I don't spin out because I do the deal. I stay on the field. You know, I sponsor girls. You know, we go to meetings, and we have this like loving, amazing household that I never thought I was worthy of. I never thought I was worthy of the life that I have. And that's like the most beautiful thing. So it's like, you know, cutting the cord to the story that I believed, and it wasn't real. And having this awakening, and then just being, you know, on paper, body slammed, but not really, because I walk around with that golden shovel and I dig a little deeper. I dig a little deeper. And there's so much beauty underneath the experience that I had because it cracked my heart open a little bit more. I have no idea what time it is. How are we looking? Oh, no way. Amazing. Okay. You know, when I came into these rooms, you know, you would hear stuff like, don't leave before the miracle, or, you know, wait for the promises. And I was like, miracles and promises don't happen to me. You know, it was very clear, like, that's not part of my path. But, you know, when I was 4 years sober, I share this. I'm sure some of you guys who have heard me have heard this, but I love it. I think it's so beautiful. I get a call from, I'm down at Coffee Bean in Malibu, and I get a call from Sarah from the Malibu Times, and she's like, is Barbie there? And I'm like, this is she, and this is Sarah from the Malibu Times. And, you know, Malibu Times, I associate with the FBI, the CIA, the police, like, you know what I mean? Because I run from that, you know, because I'm bad. You know, in my head wants to tell me that I'm bad and I'm sick and I'm bad, and no. So I kind of paused and wanted to give her a different name, and she said, do you have a minute? And I was like, depends. And she said, I just want to let you know that you won Mother of the Year. Malibu Times does every year Mother of the Year, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it, like, front page of the Malibu Times with your kids. And here's the thing: I didn't believe her. I didn't believe her because I was like, no, there's no way. And so I asked her. I'm like, you know what? Can I call you right back? And I went outside and I sat with it. And I recapped, I was 4 years sober, I recapped what the last 4 years looked like and how much work I had put in to change and how much willingness I brought to the table to be a different mom and to give my kids the mom that they deserved, because they chose me. You know, they deserved more, and I knew that deep down. And so I thought about being PTA president, and I thought about, you know, if I told them I'm going to pick them up at 3, I'm there at 2:45, and you know, I'm going to make dinner, and dinner's on the table with a set table. Like, I really put the work in all areas of my life, going to meetings, taking commitments, and showing up for these beautiful babies that needed me. And so I call her back, and she said, your kids submitted letters in to the Malibu Times. Do you want me to read them to you? And by then, I'm just like, you know, like, what? Like, I don't, Mother of the Year, like, what? Just, there's no way. And she reads me these beautiful letters, and my daughter, I want to be you when I grow up. And, my son, he was like, 8 or 9 at the time. He's like, thanks for the oranges at soccer practice. And then, Lion, my son, just, wrote this beautiful, he was so expressive and communicative, and this beautiful letter. And we're on the front page of the Malibu Times. And, to me, those are the promises. Like, to me, that's everything to me. That's everything. That is like the example of what this program can do, because I was living in a garage very, very unwell 4 years before. And then doing the work, staying on the field, like really just walking around with my shovel, discarding, disclosing, like just diving, digging deeper and deeper. I'm mother of the frickin' year, the front page of the Malibu Times. And, today my daughter is 27 years old, and she's my best friend. We didn't talk for like 3 years. We didn't even make eye contact. It was bad. He was a witness, because it took time. It took a couple years into my sobriety for her to like trust me again. And she does want to be like me when she grows up. She honestly is like a mini me, and I've never been more blessed, to walk through this life, feeling so loved and so supported, and knowing that I have a solution. My son wanted to be here so bad, and I'm going to share this. He fought to be here for so long. His disease was long. And the last 5 years, he was in the hospital a lot. And he was like, Mama, I just want to, I want to travel. I want to surf. I want to eat all the food. I just want to experience life. I've never seen anyone want to live more than he did. And that was such an example for me, because I compared his cancer to alcoholism. And I was like, you're at the end of the road, and there is no solution. There's no more treatment for you. And here's this boy just wanting to be here. And then I look at alcoholism, and I'm like, you know what? When we get to the end of the road, we have a solution. We have a treatment. And we're in it right now. We're all in it together. And so it made me realize that I'm going to continue to fight for my life till the day I die, like the way he fought for his. And I hope and I pray that every single one of you in this room remember his name, Lion, and remember how hard he fought, or a loved one of your own, how hard they fought. Fight for them. Like, our life depends on it, and we have a solution. And this is it. We're in it. And we're in it together. And there's nothing more beautiful to me. There's nothing more beautiful. So I don't know many of you, but the love that I have in my heart for every single one of you is so big. It's so big. And I thank you for letting me come here tonight. And I thank you for letting me lay all my stuff on the table, because I know I'm safe in here. And I know I can. And I know I'm supported. And yeah, let's keep living. Let's keep living.